How's it, guys? It's Bernard Marcus here. Originally E4, 1973. It was a good year. I'm living in Melbourne. I've been here since 1986, and I want to send my very best wishes to you guys who are going to be present there, because unfortunately I'm not going to be able to make it. I just hope you have an absolute great time, and I'll be interested to see some video. Okay, so I went to Muizenberg Junior School, right? And I was actually at some part of the junior school career, I was with guys like Grant Geddes, and I remember Charles Edelstein was there as well for a short while. And then I came to SACS in Standard 6 only. So, and then suddenly these guys were there as well. But, Muizenberg was a tough neighborhood. So my mother was like dead set. It's like, you will go to SACS. You and your brother, my eldest brother, you will go to SACS. Because like if I'd gone to Muizenberg High, God knows what would have happened to me. I would have like been doing courses like advanced knife throwing and things like that. Because it was a rough neighborhood.
I think.
So yeah, I came along to SACS in Standard 6, and then I was suddenly thrown in with these guys who, like, let's just say, I remember we did this test in A1 to decide whether what stream you're going to be in, and I just found that the whole school kind of, like, I got caught in this vortex of this academic excellence as well as the sporting excellence, and I just got swept along. But coming from Muizenberg and all the traveling, it did limit me. And I remember like things like school plays. It was, oh God, all the traveling and the swimming gala and things like that really kind of, let's say, put a damper on me being able to take part in all those things, because it would have meant like getting home at 7 o'clock at night. And yeah, and on Saturday it was like on the train to go to play rugby, and it was, from that point of view, it did have its drawback. I wouldn't say that I felt different. I was just, I mean, I was aware that a lot of the guys had come up through the junior school, and that like now I had to make new friends and everything, and these guys had just come up and they've been friends since sub A.
What was
But
that like?
I think uh, no, it wasn't bad. I didn't have a problem with that actually. I got very friendly quickly with guys like Jonathan Sandler and a few of those guys. But it definitely was an issue with the traveling that like after school, I remember it was like a 15-minute walk down the road, past the swimming pool, past some sushi. I don't forget walking past some sushi. And then it was like 15 minutes, and then it was a half an hour train ride. So, but at the time, if you ask me to think about it now, then oh wow, it was a big deal. But at the time, it was like, well, this was life. This was normal. That's right. Yeah, he was 2 years ahead of me.
Mhm.
But the interesting thing is that, and this is what's kind of really weird, because I come from three boys, family of three boys, and the two older ones were extremely good at sport, but like excellent, absolutely excellent. And then I came along and I had a totally different build to them. Like they were thick set, short, thick set, and both sprinters. And I came along, and well, I was a middle distance runner, but I never had the ability that they had. But maybe if I did have, then I would have stayed like late and everything. But I remember I'd be staying after school in summer, and I'd be running around the track. I remember there was Cats, what's his name, used to be running around there, the older brother of who's the Cats guy was with us?
Tony.
Tony. Yeah, his older brother. He'd be running around there, and I'd be leaving at 5 o'clock.
Mm.
But if I was like in that top category, it's not to say that I would have been hampered,
Mm. Yeah.
but it's like something that I'd never even thought about.
Yeah.
But when I do talk to people now and they ask me about my schooling, and then I tell them that, well, I came from this absolutely top school in Cape Town. This was a government school, but the credentials of the school were such that it was like a private school because of the academic achievement and the caliber of the people who went there and the sports. I mean, I remember every Saturday morning watching the first team play rugby and things like that. You know, it's only when people, like when you're 67 and you now reflect on it, and people ask you about it, and you say, well, you know, that was quite a place I went to. And then I also throw in the fact that I was in matric with Peter Kirsten, and like, wow, people, we know Peter Kirsten and everything. So it's interesting that you reflect on the past now, but at the time, it was just, well, this was school. It was nothing special. But you know, when you start talking about the teachers, I mean, like I remember you mentioned Ince. I only have good memories of him. I even remember one incident, and I think this must have been shortly after a parents-teachers meeting, and I was obviously doing something wrong in the class, which happened quite often. And and he said to me, Bernard, your mother wouldn't be very happy if she heard about this. And it like that stuck with me because it's like he remembered my mother at this meeting. And no, I very fond memories of him. I remember the likes of Mariki Basson and Dan Norton, Badenhorst, and of course, Herr Fuch. My first love, to be honest, was engineering.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, I went to university, and in first year, I tried to become an engineer, and then it didn't work out. So I would have been, if I'd gone to tech, then I would have become an engineer. But because that is what my real love was, like anything mechanical. You know, when I used to go on audit, when you went on an audit in the accounting profession in South Africa, the first thing they did was they took you around the factory to show you what was going on. And I'd be looking at the machines going up and down and drilling, and that guys would have to call me back, like, hang on, Bernard, you're not going to be in the factory. You're going to do the.
Yeah.
I went to university, and uh, what happened was the one thing I was very good at, uh, although I mean I thought I was good, but with the likes of guys like I think Jonathan Sleep and people like that, I used to think I was very good at maths. That was my top I'd say academic achievement. And funnily enough, in Badenhorst class we did commercial arithmetic, and I did bookkeeping from the age of 14. So it was already instilled in me. And when it came to my matric results, my best result was commercial arithmetic. And after not doing so well in first year at uni, I went to have an aptitude test. And they said, oh, you need to do something with figures and data processing and computers. And then I got talking to all my friends. They said, oh, Bernard, why don't you become an accountant like us? And I thought, well, you know what? It sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me. But the interesting thing is that now everything's done on a computer, and I like to think that I've got pretty good computer skills, and I don't even consider it work because everything I'm doing is on a computer. So I'm loving it. I actually, after the first year, then I decided, well, you can do accounting part-time. So I did articles. I went to work as an article clerk, and then we went to lectures in the evening. So I'd arrive at 5:30 for lectures, and then Saturday morning. So it was pretty hard going. And then I got a certificate in theory of accounting, and then wrote the board exam and passed first time. And I became a CA, and I came to Australia and did a conversion course. And I'm now an FCA, which is it's not what you think it is. It's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants.
Did you go to the army at all, or did you manage to get out of it?
Yes. Oh no, I went in 1980. I went to university first. Then I finished university, wrote the board exam. Then I went to the army in 1980, and I was in the trenches for 2 years. Well, actually, no, sorry, it was behind a desk. So after 4 months, I think I got posted down to the castle, and I was in internal audit. His next door neighbor was Janine and Rodney Gold, and he had his 21st a month after his father died. I don't know if you remember. It was a month after his father died. His father died when he was 50 or something, and then Daniel had his 21st. And I saw Janine there, and then came summer, and some guy was having a 21st. I had a choice of people to ask, and I chose Janine, and that was it. And we got married in 79, and I went to the army, and then around about 85, when the trouble started and things like that, then we got this idea that, you know what, while we're young and the children are young, this might be a good idea to leave the country. So we put our papers in, and they got back to us very quickly, and they said, okay, you've got a year to decide. I said, what do you mean? They said, you've got a year to decide to go to Australia. If you don't go within a year, then that. So in 1986, we came to Australia because they had like a wanted list. And I think the top one, probably still is today, was pastry chefs, if you don't mind. And it was very easy to become an Australian chartered accountant. It's like you had to do company law and tax. And it was so simple that it's like you had to apply to fail if you wanted to fail. And that expression, sense of entitlement, that's what we seem to notice amongst our friends' children, and I'm talking about children who are between 30 and 40, that they've got the sense of entitlement. And, we worked hard. We came with nothing. I literally came with like $10,000, and because I've been in the army and everything, we started from scratch. So we worked hard, whereas the kids now are growing up, and well, it's like 2 holidays a year, isn't it? Surely that's what we should be having. And I mean, you talk about a car. Some child gets a new car, and it's automatic, air conditioning, electric windows, sensors, camera, everything. Now that's a sense of entitlement.
It sure is.
But I just want to get back to one point that you mentioned, and this is what I say to people. They talk about teachers here, and I say, we never had teachers. They were masters. These teachers, every single one of them, well, almost, they were masters at what they did. Here, teaching things are very different now. In the old days, you never answered back. Spoke about Whiteford, and I remember going down. I got caned once, and it was the first and last time. But I mean, you were scared of those guys. Oh, respect, of course. There was no long hair at school. I remember once in a class of Doug Brown that I'm not sure if it was a guy called Storr, Stohr, I think maybe an E4, and it could
Storr B4.
Mike Storr. Yeah, it could have been him where he had clips in his hair, and Doug Brown made him stand up, and he took the clips out, and he got sent down to Dean Street for a haircut. Now I must say that I was more well behaved in that kind of environment. I was never sent down for a haircut. So it's like at the time I thought, well, this is normal, but now we've got a lot of friends here who are actually teachers at big private schools. And I mean, the South African credentials, the teachers that came across, they were top class teachers. They've worked their way up to principal, vice principal, and apparently at the one school, a lot of the teachers are thinking of leaving because it is so difficult looking after these children who are wild and have the sense of entitlement, and there's no respect. We never had that. It was yes sir, no sir.
Certainly did.
And I think we were better off for it. Well, the one person that I remember very well was Mariki Basson, because she actually used to get me to come to school early for extra Afrikaans lessons. And that stands out because it's like, well, she did this for me. I'd say it did work. I didn't go to university and become a professor in Afrikaans or anything, but it certainly worked. In fact, just on that, they were dedicated. But it's interesting that you talk about professor, because I noticed from some of the emails that there's the odd professor around.
There are a lot.
There are no slouches there. But there's one thing I just want to pick up on, and maybe you can add to it, because it also came up when we talk here about the one private school where it's like, if you aren't expecting to get an A, they'd prefer if you weren't at the school. So what I'm really alluding to is, I remember that after JC, quite a few guys left and went to Abbott's. And Okay, so it was after JC, it was standard 9 and 10 that they kind of left and went to Abbott. So the result was that by the time I got to matric, in my matric class, it was the entire class was going to university. And it also gets back to my upbringing, because I remember my mother's words. It was not a case of, gee, it would be good if you went to university. It was a case of, when you go to university, what are you going to do? So it was, there was never any consideration of going to be a mechanic or something. It was like, you're going to university, and that's like the home I came from. I don't know, thinking back 50 years, whether it's like those guys were encouraged to leave. In other words, why did in 1974 I was at uni with him, and
Yes, that's right.
he'd come back from the UK and he brought a black cab.
That's it.
And I remember he was telling me that someone came to him because he was parking in the wrong place and they wanted to give him a ticket. And he said to me, this is what he said to the guy. He said, gee, it must be amazing you being able to do this and give tickets out. Are you sure you're not God? But now you guys had all come up through junior school, and I'd met Jonathan once before because his first cousin lived in Muizenberg round the corner. So I'd like knew of him.
Right.
But then we became very, very friendly.
I remember that very
No,
well.
but it's only when, like, you're talking to other people here or wherever you are and you're talking about your school days, that suddenly it comes out how amazing the school was and how amazing these teachers were. And it was like a private school, a top private school, but yet it wasn't. For me, it's because of Facebook and WhatsApp that these things have become possible. Like keeping up with the guys who you went to school with and things like that. Whereas for other people, they've kept up with them because they're friends. Whereas I find that it's because of Facebook and WhatsApp and like that's how these connections have continued. And to be honest, how or why a connection continues doesn't matter. It's there. I think a lot of people during COVID, they spent a lot of time at home and they spent a lot of time on the internet and things like that. After school, in my first few years after school, I wasn't particularly interested in things like the Old Boys Union in my early days after school. For whatever reason, it was like, that was school, it's now finished, and I didn't really have an interest in making contact with people who, like if I had friends, I saw my friends, obviously, but I wasn't particularly interested in things like the Old Boys Union. And I've been to a few reunions in Melbourne, not recently. The last one was, I think, 2016, because the guys they were much younger than me now, and it's been interesting to talk to them. One of them, I'm not sure if you remember his name, Colin Sakanovsky.
Of course.
He would have been in Sub A, I think, when we were in matric. So he's in Melbourne.
Oh, yeah.
And Maxwell Michael, who was head boy in can't remember which year. He lives in Melbourne as well. One thing I can say about South Africans in Australia, and that is that, and this is my opinion, my esteemed opinion, they have made a mark here. We recently had visitors from America. We had South African visitors from America, and the way they spoke about America, they've been there a long time as well. They didn't speak about America as if it was their home, like we talk about Australia as being our home. They're in this country which is population of 260 million, and so you're South African, big deal. In Australia, you mention South African, and the neighbor says, "Oh yeah, my daughter's married to a South African," or my son's in-laws, they're South African. There's a connection with everyone. When I was growing up, and I went to the station, and I saw these benches, and the one said whites only, and the one said non-whites. And you went to a restaurant, and it was for whites. And wherever you went, it was for whites. Now, in your mind, isn't this telling you something? It's like, well, you white, and therefore you number one. Now, that's how we grew up. And only when I got to a certain age did I start thinking, gee, like why aren't those guys allowed to sit in the same compartment as us? So maybe that is why the South Africans have got this apparent sense of entitlement. It's like because they were brought up being told you number one. My parents were in the hotel business, and I remember that I was obviously 18 because I was driving. My father said, "Oh, look, some of the staff have worked overtime tonight. Can you take them home?" And they lived in the free ground.
Yeah.
And I took them to the free ground, which was near Muizenberg, and I saw the shanties, and I drove in, and I saw this, and I thought, oh my God, like, is this real? I was right in there. So I saw how these people live. Now, I want to make another point, and that is that I find there's a big difference. You talk about the sense of entitlement. There's a big difference between South Africans, if they come from Cape Town or Johannesburg, in the men and the women. I mean, I can meet a girl and I can say, you went to King David in Johannesburg, didn't you? And she said, how do you know? I can hear from her voice. I remember one of the year-end assemblies where Robin Whiteford was giving his usual speech, and he said something about and during the holidays, when you go home and you see the 58-year-old man who's busy working in the garden, please don't refer to him as the boy.
You're right, Barry. You're
You
right.
remember that?
Now,
An Australian guy said, he said to me once, tell me, are all South African men accountants? I said, why do you ask? He said, every South African I meet, he's an accountant. I was walking in the street in my first 2 weeks here, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and they held up a $20 note and they said, oh, excuse me, you dropped this. And I like looked around like, sorry, is this a trick? That wouldn't happen in South Africa.
oh, God, no.
Yeah, I want to tell you a story about a South African client. So I'm asking the question, he's got this investment property. I'm saying, you got this $20,000 repair. Now, is it a repair or is it capital improvements? And he said, which is better for tax? I said, well, if it's a repair. So he said, why are you asking me then?
Ah.
And a similar one was, I'm asking the guy about the kilometers traveled in his car. Like, is it 10,000 or more than 40,000? And he said, well, which is better? I said, well, if it's more than 40, the FBT is low. He says, why are you asking? And that's the South African. There is a connection between South Africans. And I'll give you an example. Where I work, I needed an admin lady, and they brought a few people in. And then they brought in, and I interviewed them, and they brought this one girl in. She was Afrikaans. And it's like we're from the same country. I speak English, she speaks Afrikaans, but there was a connection. And I said, you know what, put her on. And she's been with us for 3 years. And we've got a connection between the two of us that no one else has got. I speak to her in Afrikaans.
Is jy tweetalig?
Yeah, but I mean, ek praat nie baie Afrikaans nie.
Jy praat rooi
So, like every now and so every now and again, I say to her, geez, those guys are doers.
Oh, fantastic.
But there's this connection. There's this connection.
Amazing. Amazing.